Francis Ngannou lands at number 28 on this list, but I think we can all agree he's probably number one when it comes to instilling fear in his opponent's souls. The 6'4" heavyweight amassed a record of 12-2 in the UFC, 17-3 overall. Ngannou would make his UFC debut in 2015, beating Luis Enrique by TKO at UFC on Fox 17. His next three fights would see him get wins over Curtis Blades, Bojan Mihajlovic, and Anthony Hamilton, all by stoppage. Next up would be the first time he faced a former UFC heavyweight champion, in Andre the Pitbull Arlovski. Ngannou would dispatch of the Pitbull in the first round, claiming his first of 4 victories over former UFC heavyweight champions. The win over Arlovski set up his toughest opponent to date, a former K1 World Grand Prix Max champion in Alistair Overeem. If we're making a list of the most brutal KOs in UFC history, this one would have to be at the top, with Ngannou nearly turning Overeem into a Pez dispenser with that gigantic uppercut. In my opinion, this was the fight that put Ngannou on the map. The victory over Overeem set the stage for Ngannou's first title shot against a fighter who many believe is the greatest heavyweight that ever lived in Stipe Miocic. This would be the first time we ever saw weakness in Ngannou's game, as Miocic used wrestling and cardio to retain his belt, defeating Ngannou by unanimous decision. Looking to bounce back, Ngannou gets booked against fellow knockout artist Derek Lewis. This promised to be fireworks except one thing, not a good fight for either guy. Lewis walks away with the W, but there was really no winner that night. The defeat stung, but would prove to be the last time we see Ngannou lose in the UFC. From there he took out top contender Curtis Blades, again finishing him by TKO. Francis Ngannou would then face back-to-back former heavyweight champions in Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos. The Predator would rack 2 wins, both by stoppages. Up-and-comer Jairzinho Rozenstruik would be next. A crazy exchange would lead to Rozenstruik's demise as Ngannou finished him by KO in round 1. The victory would ensure a rematch with champion Stipe Miocic. The rematch would go a little different this time for Ngannou as he blended his striking, his wrestling, and this time around he got the finish, evening up the series at 1-1. This sets the stage for the final fight in the UFC for Francis Ngannou, a fight against interim champion Ciryl Gane. After dishing out 5 consecutive finishes, Ngannou had to go to the judges' scorecards. Despite suffering tears in his knee, Francis Ngannou would end up winning a unanimous decision, becoming the undisputed UFC heavyweight champion. Ngannou would leave the UFC to sign with PFL, leaving one of the most anticipated fights in UFC history on the table, a fight against, of course, Johnny Bones Jones. While Ngannou's reign of terror in the UFC may have been short by some heavyweight standards, his body of work and vicious KO cement him as the 28th greatest UFC fighter of all time. And sorry, John Jones, the current baddest man on the planet.